Can I just nerd out for a little bit? Like, just let me. We're all friends here. Nailing an ending to a video game is hard. Nailing the end of a 50-hour video game is even harder. Nailing the end of a 50-hour RPG that exists to be the connective setup to a future game is basically impossible. But you know what else was impossible? Landing the Normandy through the Omega-4 relay and taking out the collector base. What about facing down the horrific realities of your failures and pressing on anyway because somebody else might have gotten it wrong? You know what is really, truly impossible in an Xbox 360 era shooting game based around the military? Making me care about the fates and emotions of 12 different squad mates all at once, and their opinions of me, my leadership, and my choices. Some people consider Mass Effect 2 one of the best video games of all time. I am not one of those people, but I do consider its ending mission one of gaming's greatest achievements. And after the dramatic conclusion with Saren in the first game, and the expert marriage of mechanics and narrative in the assault on the collector base in Mass Effect 2, you might think BioWare had mastered how to end a video game going into its final third act, right? Right? It is the case for many people that when someone mentions Mass Effect, they think endings. Specifically the ending of the third game and the trilogy at large, and more specifically, they think of disappointment. Mass Effect 3's ending was such a moment in gaming culture that for many who haven't played the series before, this is what they know it for. It was an instant struggle for people both in due part to its execution, but also the limitations of its medium, a sort of inevitable breaking point of the narrative structure of the games up until this point. I believe for a lot of people, Mass Effect, for all of its efforts and innovations in cross-game storytelling, was never going to satisfactorily tie together Commander Shepard's story in the way they wanted it to. I believe this because it is a video game that values choice, not because it is a flawed story or that it was mismanaged. I hated it when I first played it. I was so distraught I talked to my mom about it minutes after the credits rolled. I still don't know why. I actually think the ending as it stands now really isn't that bad considering the circumstances. It's just that those circumstances are that bad. But let me explain. Mass Effect taught us the longer a series goes, the more it inflates and bloats and gets out of control, the harder it is to wrap it all together and still make you feel like you had a say in its construction. Because the thing that hurt the most about the ending of Mass Effect 3 wasn't really what happened, but that your choices didn't end up mattering. You get the same final choice at the end, with a few exceptions to how well you prepared with your galactic readiness meter. The thing that hurt the most was that in the 11th hour, the final 15 minutes, the game aggressively depersonalizes a deeply personal narrative experience. And yeah, it hurt. Not because my alien friends were dead, or the characters did something wrong, or that the journey was over, but because the apparatus of video game design became abundantly clear at that moment. The curtain was ripped away and the machinery was revealed, demolishing the illusion for me. Mass Effect 3 was never going to be able to make all of your choices count until the last moment, but they did an incredible job fooling me along the way. Mass Effect 2 does not make this mistake. Mass Effect 2's ending is enrapturing in a way the series never learned from. If ME3's ending is flawed in its artifice, then ME2's ending is marvelous in its hypnosis. For 90 minutes or so, I don't think about anything besides the objective. In the early days of my YouTube channel, I used to have this series I would call Game Study, a collegiate aspiring lesson plan on mechanics or game design or whatever pretentious connection I could make. It was fun and cathartic, but the main objective was a kind of adorable fantasy of wanting to create the curriculum for an upper education course on game design. I wanted to bring in a whole new group of people into learning about the Ludo narrative. I wanted to write lessons about flow states, not King Lear. When I would write these videos, I would kind of imagine how they would fit into a wider curriculum of video game design. This line of thinking would take me down a sort of philosophical conversation of where do we even begin talking about the most important foundational elements of game design and literacy? Or, I don't know, what games would be essential reading for Game Design 101? Well, it may shock you to learn I don't really have an answer. I mean, the history of games analysis on YouTube would suggest we start with Mario's World 1-1, a simple lesson in game design that has clear and concise ways the game conditions the player towards the objectives. On the other hand, my literary brain says a fresh mind should start somewhere with a little more humanity, something that shows the narrative and mechanical synchronicity possible in games. Something like Edith Finch, Stardew Valley, Hades, The Outer Wilds, or The Last of Us. Finally, my teacher brain says that these hypothetical students should start on something worthy of discussion, something with a diversity of opinion, with fertile ground for students to feel like they can take their own position on whether or not something works. And I don't think there is a better franchise for that part of my brain than Mass Effect. I feel this conflict, this slingshotting between me liking something and me disliking something, more so in Mass Effect than basically any other games out there. In a sentence, I think that the Mass Effect games act as a perfect discussion ground for talking about the stark successes and dramatic failures of video games as an interactive medium. Unfortunately, I am not some professor of Ludology 101. I'm just an amateur games writer on the tube. But if I were, I would have plenty to say about the ways in which the series blows me away with its narrative interconnectivity, but continuously stifles itself with mechanics that encourage gaming the morality system, rather than role-playing. If I taught that class, I would talk about how Commander Shepard is a great example of explaining the spectrum of the video game protagonist, how they, in my opinion, successfully act as both an avatar for player expression, but also an intentional narrative fixture with traits and opinions and personality. You could go on and on about Mass Effect's binary morality systems, the way its mechanics shift across the series to meet flavor of the year design trends, its hilariously simplistic romances, or the ending, God, the ending, everyone has an opinion about the ending. Mass Effect to me is the melting pot of all that is right and wrong with video games. It creates incredible narrative moments built upon a foundation of character design and mission structure that I experienced over half a decade in 3 different games. In contrast, it takes every opportunity to jump on design trends of the time, lacking any real mechanical individualism in favor of turning into a stop-and-pop linear shooter, and abandoning all of its more interesting RPG elements as the series progresses. It desperately fights against itself by creating meaningful choices that end up lacking any significant narrative or mechanical consequence. Time and time again, Mass Effect begs to be taken seriously, but can't seem to take the next step toward breaking out of the limitations of video game storytelling. Yet in a lot of ways, I still love Mass Effect. The first game is one of my favorite science fiction pieces of all time. As the series progresses, however, the artifice and gaminess of the series starts to deteriorate at the artistic vision the games once had. And while I do think that Mass Effect 2 is probably a better video game than the first one, I can't shake the feeling that it flirts a little too closely to the silver screen for it to be capable of all the narrative juggling that it has to do. Because Mass Effect 2 basically is a movie, or I guess more specifically, some sort of episodic cable network television show. Its production, art, sex appeal, bombast, and glisteningly beautiful characters all attribute to this idea of prestigious linearity. Mass Effect 2 seems so manicured, both aesthetically and narratively, that it honestly rubs me the wrong way on the most recent playthrough of the series. It is absolutely a turning point in BioWare's game-making career, a turning point toward glitz and glamour rather than substantive role-playing meat on the bone. Which is partly why I find the ending of the game so gosh darn fascinating. Mass Effect 2 and 3 were both such tremendous commercial successes that the episodic, muscular, shiny look of the new BioWare RPG just had to stay. It's crazy that I've had such an issue with these final 2 games because they hit such high highs. The Citadel DLC, the conversations with the Leviathans in Mass Effect 3, the extraordinary connection of all of its disparate parts. It is genuinely something to behold. To me, Mass Effect will always be defined by its incongruence, its ability to mix the good and the bad inside such a beautiful calamity of a series. From a game design perspective, Mass Effect as a series is perplexing to me, but its moments are clear as day to examine. And none more are as clearly brilliant as Mass Effect 2's final mission. Because for about 90 minutes or so, the game decides to release its inhibition and feel the rain on its skin. It lets loose of its narrative roadblocks and implements a genuinely complex and frighteningly unforgiving set of narrative possibilities, all the while maintaining the game's commitment to Hollywood-style stakes and production. The final mission of Mass Effect 2 gets to have its cake and eat it too, a marriage of style and substance. A moment that, for me, saves the game from 2010 Xbox-era mediocrity. Let's talk about it. And oh yeah, for the real fans in the back, I'm David OZ, and this is Game Study. There's really only one way I can adequately show the importance and scale of what happens in this mission, and that is by showing the flowcharts made by fans of the game showcasing all the different outcomes of the mission. Previous to this point, the game has remained a relatively linear third-person shooter game, never too concerned with having the player's choices radically change the story. This is not the case for the final mission. For a little context, Mass Effect 2 is structurally really quite interesting as a video game. It takes the Dirty Dozen concept of squad building and stretches it out over dozens and dozens of hours. Essentially, every mission in the game strives to be somewhat connected to the final mission. Recruiting characters like Mordin, who have the scientific ability to get you on the ship. Tracking down muscle like Grunt or Samara so that you have the might necessary to survive once you're on the ship. You're essentially given individual dossiers of enigmatic figures across the galaxy, and each mission is sort of a weekly episode featuring that new character and future squad mate. The trope of, we need to build a team, is on full display here, and honestly, it's awesome. The reality is, though, you have to convince them to do it. Despite just how different these characters are in their motivations and interests, you have to tell them to go on this mission for really the greater good. Commander Shepard basically has to convince these people to die. At the end of the game, Commander Shepard and their band of merry mercenaries are tasked with navigating through the Omega-4 Mass Effect relay, a transportation system that has never been more than a one-way trip for any previous ship. Ships that go through the relay have never survived, let alone returned. You are embarking on this trip through the relay to take out the home base of the Collectors, a mercenarial race of bug-like creatures that have been capturing billions of humans throughout the galaxy for unknown nefarious purposes. So yeah, I mean, not so bad, right? That's all you have to do. Go through the death trap, go straight into the heart of the evil Collectors, annihilate whatever things they are up to, then leave. Easy enough. I can't speak for everyone, but what this made me think upon playing the game first is that, yeah, okay, suicide mission, sure. All right, game, definitely. I mean, we might have one character have a scripted heroic death, but come on now. This isn't like the Red Wedding. We'll be fine. That's just video game dramatics. But here's the thing. The game isn't wrong. People can and will die. A lot of people will die if you're not careful. As far as I know, every single character on the Normandy, besides Joker, I think, can die. And that's including Shepard. It is possible to have everyone survive, of course, but as you saw in the flowchart, it takes such an extraordinary series of events and correct choices that no one should really expect to leave the Collector base without casualty their first go-around. When I first played the game 10 or so years ago, I had devastating casualties. Half of my crew died before I even landed the darn Normandy. I had my favorite character be disassembled before my eyes before I even got within firing distance of the Collector ship. By the time I had control of my character, by the time I had boots on the ground, fingers on the thumbstick, I had already suffered heartache. So many games raise stakes for the entire runtime of the experience, but few actually live up to the stakes advertised. If we think about exactly why Mass Effect 2's ending succeeds, one of the pillars of its success has to be the realization of its stakes. In fact, generally I think the final mission's excellence can be understood by breaking down 3 different ways it differentiates itself from other endings I've seen in games. I would say those pillars are the ways that it realizes its stakes, like we just mentioned, but also how malleable and variable the systems and different combinations of squad mates, and how that can create a matrix of different outcomes for your squad. And finally, about how the final 90 minutes of this game, it marries score, cinema, and level design into a moment that's much grander than the sum of its parts, which is crazy considering how amazing those parts are. The mission starts with a collaborative meeting with your squad where you make important decisions about who is going to do what in the collector base. You need a tech expert to navigate through the vents, and you need a military leader to command the vanguard unit. You have to pick someone who can both command respect, but also who is willing to make difficult decisions. You need someone who has the intelligence for the security system, but who isn't so smart they'll get in their own way. In this moment, you are genuinely juggling egos and personalities as much as you are skill sets. And I've played Mass Effect 2 at least 5 times in my life. I've had what feels like a different combination of deaths and survivors every single time. It truly feels like a pretty great balancing of consequences given how heartbreaking some of those deaths can feel to someone really connected with the characters. And by the way, roughly half of the consequences you meet on this trip through the Omega 4 relay are all decided before you even start the mission. This could either be ship upgrades or squad loyalty. If you skip on either of these, main squad mate characters will die on this mission. You cannot have a deathless playthrough of the game without doing all of the upgrades and loyalty missions. So on my last playthrough, I did exactly that. I tried to do everything while going for the Platinum Trophy. While it was rewarding to have finally done this kind of playthrough, it became increasingly clear to me that this was not how the game was meant to play out. My exploitation of the convoluted systems to ensure everyone's survival felt more like an elaborate 100% completionist Easter egg rather than being the narrative finale the game was actually planning for. It's why I'm going to be fitting in different footage from other playthroughs I've found here to give a better idea of all the different ways this mission can go. Only speaking for myself here, but I find myself rolling my eyes a bit when big story missions threaten life-threatening stakes, especially when I know that the series is going to continue in the next game. The idea that a final mission will be as threatening as the fiction says it is honestly pretty rare. And I think that's why it's so important that the mission so quickly begins with someone's demise, right? It instantly hits the player with a death if they were not prepared. Honestly, I still remember who it was when I first played, and it's the beginning of this mission is just the ultimate tone setter, just in general, a flurry of fast-moving cuts and cinematography. Cinematic? I gotta delete that. This might have just been the single coolest thing I've ever seen in my life when I first experienced it. I would have been probably 15 years old when the game first came out, and I explicitly remember the fear and the stress I was feeling going through the relay for the first time. And unfortunately, this is the part of the video that becomes a bit intangible, a bit impossible to analyze. The marriage of music and scale here, the presentation of such enormous consequence and risk as you're flying through space. It is stunning, unbelievably moving art direction. When people say that Mass Effect 2 is one of the best games of all time, this is what they are talking about. In the same way that all members of the Normandy crew have come together toward this one goal, so too does every moving part of the game's design and presentation. The moment has narrative weight, not in a way that you could weigh on a scale, but considering the fact that the game has basically been completely character-driven up until this point, to switch it around and make it entirely plot-driven is such a dramatically satisfying moment. There's a real thrill that comes with this mission's implication. It is the ultimate desperation move, as most of the game up until this point has seen the collectors getting away with mass kidnappings and murder. You know so little about your enemy, yet here you are skipping ahead to the part where you storm their home base. It is an exhilaratingly stupid thing to do, taking the fight to the enemy like this. But it is necessary. Or, I think it is. The heroics of the scene certainly has convinced me that it is. Even the Normandy, God bless the Normandy, an inanimate ship, takes on such a heroic, carefully crafted role and character. An extension of Joker, it is so obvious that BioWare took a great deal of time animating the spaceship to effortlessly float through space. It is a stealth ship, after all, not a Vanguard warship, and the animation fully leans into that, having it slice in between rubble and lasers. Cool doesn't even really begin to describe this ship's animation. And all of this is substantiated with heroic music, heroic speeches, and heroic actions. Mass Effect is genuinely at its best when it accepts its naive operatic nature. If you think about this mission as a bit of a microcosm of the entire thematic through-line of the series, then you will see just how much the series values togetherness and unity. According to the final mission here, nothing would be possible were it not for the fact that so many conflicting groups put aside their differences to come together here right now. Mass Effect is so optimistic in its storytelling, so idealistic in its idea of heroism and unity, that it's hard to criticize it at all when it culminates in moments like these. It's why I love Mass Effect 1 over 2 and 3, where the series just got so cynical and dark at times, mainly aesthetically. I mean, just look at how Mass Effect 1 ends, with Shepard looking off screen into the wild blue yonder. Mass Effect 2 revisits this feeling with its music and heroics, and I think it's better off for it. We spoke about it a bit before, but during that step in the mission where you have to make decisions about which character does what, man, when I say I have never taken a harder test in my life, I think the game does well during this whole mission, just throughout the whole thing, not just here, by never making your squad mates' survival have much to do with your gameplay ability. With rare exceptions, your squad mates' survival is based upon their relationship to you and the decisions you make as commander. To me, it gives humanity to the squad mates in that they aren't relying on you to shoot people for them, but they are relying on you to make the decisions they cannot, the thing that you can do that they can't. Your success here is measured by leadership, not marksmanship. Who do you want through the ventilation shaft? Who do you think should lead the vanguard? Who do you, not Shepard, you, trust to take all of your crewmates back to the Normandy alone? And what occurs after you finally land the Normandy is a flurry of genuinely difficult combat sequences that are paced with excellent variety. If you aren't enjoying a certain set piece or arena during this playthrough, you can rest assured knowing it won't last longer than 5 or 10 minutes or so. There is a driving forward momentum during this mission that is really reminiscent of the ways we talked about how a mission in Call of Duty structures itself. And shout out to you if you remember when we talked about that in the COD video. Admittedly, playing through this mission on Insanity does diminish a lot of that driving momentum, but on the other hand, it emphasizes the feeling of overwhelming odds, so pick your poison, I guess? I'm guessing many people will remember the section where you have to choose a biotics expert to bubble your squad as you navigate through a collector-infested open area. That bit is so memorable to me, and I have distinct memories of yelling at my screen as Grunt was torn apart on the final stretch to safety. Why? It's so sad. Every death feels unique to your experience. When someone died in your game and you try to talk to someone later about the death, they would come back at you with an entirely different story of an entirely different death they experienced in their game that you never did. It's just amazing, and it's only possible in video games. Okay, I gotta get back to mission design. I got sidetracked. One thing I think the level design absolutely does nail here is the scale of the collector base. Seeing the Normandy, an entire StarCraft, just barely resting atop the ship like a flea, it's hard to wrap your head around, especially when you consider the ship you're boarding is filled to the brim with humans being harvested. Yep, that's the kicker of the whole one-way trip thing. Your fellow human colonists that all got captured by the collectors, they're being porridgeified. It is a shocking, disgusting, important moment that gives an immediate justification and catharsis to your mission. If there was any doubt about the risk you were taking, about whether or not so many people should come together to effectively die on this mission, the doubt should be gone. I remember thinking, someone has to do something about this. This moment is a necessary low point in the structure of the mission. It is a moment to rest yourself, but also to reflect narratively on what's going on. It's here that the game asks you to make your last decisions. You need to send someone back with the crew to ensure their survival on the way back to the Normandy. You need to select a group of people to hold the line so Shepard can get into the heart of the collector ship. And you need to select 2 more squad mates to go with you. To this point, most everything has followed a sort of, if you choose these choices in this order, people will survive. The implication being here, of course, is that if you just follow a guide and select all of the right buttons, people will live. But here at the end of the ending, each of your squad mates are handed a hidden number signifying their power level. In order for everyone to survive, you must choose a near perfect sequence of jobs for your squad mates throughout the entire mission, so that the remaining squad mates for the final sequence all average a certain level of power, ensuring that each of them survive. If you have any combination of remaining characters that skews the hidden power level below a certain point, someone will die. In my opinion, you can't seriously look at the mechanics behind this final section and think that they are meant to be prepared for. It isn't truly random. There are no RNG elements included in the final mission, but it is near random, and if you don't already know how the systems work, it might as well be random. I honestly have zero desire to break down the mechanical calculus of these choices, but let me just tell you it's overwhelming and obtuse. Let me show you this graph I found. Making this decision feels like you are sending people to their death. It is almost explicit in the speech your shepherd gives. You are supposed to feel like whatever your decision is, it will never be the right one. That's why I think the calculation to keep everyone alive is so difficult. It's because it isn't meant to happen. You are supposed to feel like you made the wrong decision, but the necessary one, no matter what you pick. And yeah, the ending boss fight here is kinda lame. You got me there. I guess I never said the ending to Mass Effect 2 is necessarily perfect, just that it's extraordinary. The ending here has you fighting a giant human Reaper hybrid boss fight that jacks up the whole video gaminess of the ordeal and leaves you with a sort of bog standard, do this heroic thing or this evil thing kind of BioWare-y choice right at the end. It's a bit of a regression, sure, but it's genuinely remedied right away by an immediate turn back toward the intense again as you exit the ship. The boss fight joins a sort of hilariously long list of video games who are otherwise excellent but are pressured into inconsistently bad boss fights right at the end by publishing pressures. If it was an award, the nominees would be Mass Effect 2, Batman Arkham Asylum, BioShock for sure, that might win, Borderlands, and maybe Fallout 3. I still think BioShock wins that award, but Mass Effect 2 is close. The game really should end rather melancholy, and it does. When you consider Mass Effect 2, it's easy to see how much darker and self-serious it is than Mass Effect. It's impressive to me, then, how the game puts aside the cynical darkness exhibited in the first bit of the game, and instead replaces it with a darkness that feels earned. It feels tied to your experience and your character in a way I rarely see in video games. It is a dark ending, and you should feel bad after completing the final mission. But importantly, in the fiction, I think you should feel like you would go through the Omega 4 relay again and again if the galaxy needed you to. Because that's what Shepard would do, right? And that's the kind of beautiful, naive, idealistic schlock I adore from Mass Effect. Shepard would do it, so you would too. That's role-playing. To put the ending mission in as simplest of words as I can, I would say that the player gets out as much as the player puts in. This is to say that if you do everything the game has to offer, if you do all of the side missions, Paragon or Renegade checks, ship upgrades, max level, talk to all your squad mates, and crucially do all of the loyalty missions, then you will have a chance at keeping everyone alive for the final mission. A small chance, because you still need to make all of the right decisions, but still a chance. And that's all Shepard had before they went in the relay. All games are artificial. None of them truly react to you in any meaningful way past the code written. A successful game is a game that shrouds that artificiality, that convinces you that your interaction is unique to your experience, that your role is yours and yours only. When Mass Effect 2 puts the successes and failures, the lives of your squad mates in your hands, not the writers', it feels earned. It feels real because of the care and attention put into presenting the experience in such a uniform, beautiful way. I will never forget my first playthrough of Mass Effect 2. Or my second. Or my third. You get it. I can still remember each individual playthrough. It is a genuinely incredible moment in video games, and I'm thankful you let me share it with you. Thank you for watching. Hey everyone, it's David. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate you sticking all the way to the ending like this. I like to end my videos like this by doing a little bit of a state of the channel type of thing. It's been a while since I've uploaded. It's been 5 months, basically, almost half a year, and that kind of makes me sad. But the truth is, and the reality is, everything's fine in my life. I don't have some story. I don't have some thing that happened. I don't have like, oh, it's personal stuff. It's just, in life, there are peaks and valleys of productivity, and I think I kind of hit a valley in terms of the YouTube channel. I got a new job somewhat recently in the last year, and I've just been really focused on growing that part of my life, not necessarily the content creation. But that being said, I have a renewed vigor for content creation. I'm really, really excited to make this video and the next one, which is going to be another one of those like big, long honker videos. Hopefully it doesn't take me 5 months, but I like to think it's going to be worth it if it does. It's going to be a big one. Maybe not COD big, but it's going to be big. So I'm really excited for that. I wanted to take a second to just thank you for watching and sticking with the channel. I made a Patreon post. You don't actually have to be a Patreon to see it, but you can see it. I'll link it down below. That talks a little bit about some of the writing obstacles that I've gone through in the last 5 months. I have something called the writing yips, I call them. If you watch like baseball or something, you know about yips. But I was having a really hard time putting pen to paper, and it was nice for me to make a video that is basically all about how much I love something. I'm not being critical of it. I'm not necessarily deeply analyzing something. It was just me saying, I love this thing. It's awesome, and you should see why. So I hope you enjoyed it too. It's a little bit different, but I think it helped me get over my writing yips because I feel good now. I feel back, baby. More than anything, though, I wanted to shout out some of my Patreon supporters. Thank you so much. Poop Loop, Cullen, Jacob, Chris, and Zach. Go watch his YouTube videos. They're amazing. Zach Frazier. Just put that in the bar and you'll find, you know how to use the internet. Thank you for watching. I love you. Goodbye.